This is Talk with TAS, a radio experience hosted by Dr. Teresa A. Smith, a licensed counselor and professor focused on the transformative journeys of her guests and the lessons they've learned along the way. She's also an author, speaker, and nationally known social media personality. Join her now as she interviews newsmakers, artists, authors, and more. You will learn something new. This is Talk with TAS. Here's your host, Dr. Teresa A. Smith, also known as Dr. TAS.
Here we are today. I am excited to have a conversation with A. Shane Etter. Now, I just usually say Shane Etter, and hopefully I'm pronouncing the last name correctly. And I met Shane, thank you, Shane, through a mutual friend. And I got to hear his story, and his story really resonated with me. And I want to say that he is a Southern boy. And I know people say you're saying boy, but boy means a good thing for us Southerners, and I'm real Southern.
I am one. As you alluded to, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. It doesn't get much more Southern than that, but I was born with spina bifida. As you know, I don't have any outward signs of it except for the large scar on the base of my spine where I was operated on at 6 days old to remove that growth. I've never had any physical manifestation of it, no problems. In fact, I became a black belt in karate through 6 years of hard work. I made black belt in 1979, and even being born with spina bifida. So it didn't slow me down. And I was a board member. I was on the board of directors of the Spina Bifida Association of Georgia for a couple of years as well for a term, and enjoyed that immensely. But and like I say, born in the early 50s, 53, like I was in Mississippi, they didn't know anything about spina bifida, even though it's the most common birth defect in this country. Probably, maybe in the world, but anyway, in this country. But nevertheless, the doctor who delivered me performed my surgery, and God guided him as he hopefully will guide me today so I don't mess up too badly. And he was successful, removed that, and I went on. But then, you know, normal middle class life in Mississippi in the 60s and 70s, let's call it. Moved to Georgia in 1991. My ex-wife was in management with Bell South, the what we used to call in the old days the telephone company. Now there's hundreds of telephone companies, but nevertheless she was. So we transferred over here to Georgia, and it was a great move for me, or I wouldn't have met people like my publicist Cyrus, who introduced us, and many other great writers and members of the Atlanta Writers Club, the largest writing club in the United States, that I think now over 800 members. And yeah, so I've had the inspiration of others. But the reason I started writing, in fact, was at 50 years old, I had a near fatal stroke. That did affect me physically. I have my left leg weakness causes me to drag it, somewhat significant limp or something. So my karate days were over, and about 6 years after my stroke, I noticed my brain was going through some changes. We all would like to think that our brain improves at an angle like that, like a 45-degree angle going up, but it's more like up, down, like that. And I knew that my brain was going through some changes. So anyway, we always hear that the best thing you can do for your brain is to read. Well, I've been a voracious reader virtually my whole life. And I figured if reading was that good for your brain, writing would have to be even better, creating new words on paper or on my iPad in my case, rather than just reading ones that are already there. So I started writing to improve my brain. A funny thing happened, being a voracious reader and having my favorite authors, and I like some of the best authors writing today, and a couple we've already mentioned, but I started writing to improve my brain, and a funny thing happened. 12 pages into my first novel, I knew it was good enough to be published. Because again, I was such a reader. I'm not saying it was the best thing I'd ever read, far from it, but it wasn't the worst thing I'd ever read either, which means it was somewhere in the middle, and that was good enough to be published. Better than some, worse than others. And so I started sending out queries to publishers, small indie presses. The largest houses, Simon and Schuster, Macmillan, whatever, they only work through agents. I did not have a literary agent, so I just called on the small, sent out queries, they call them, a letter introducing yourself with usually 3 pages, of which they rarely read over a paragraph, but nevertheless, that's what it does. I started sending out queries to small presses, and their first step is if you catch their eye in what you send them in those 3 pages that they read, they usually say, well, send me the full manuscript. And that's the next step. So you send them everything. And the first time that happened to me, to this small publisher, it ended up being mine. I was thrilled that he asked for the full manuscript. And then I'll never forget, on Thanksgiving, no, that was on Thanksgiving Eve. He said, on Wednesday, Thanksgiving Eve, I got an email from him, said, send me the full manuscript. He said, if you hadn't heard from me in 3 months, follow up with me. Well, in February, I got a letter from, an email from him, said, we would like to welcome you into the, I won't say the name of the publisher, whatever, publishing house, family of authors, and here's a contract. So needless to say, I went through the roof. I mean, you understand that. You're a writer. You get it, how exciting that was for me when I started writing just to improve my brain, and it turned into that. Now, nine novels later, I'm working on my 10th. My 9th will be out in the next 2 to 3 weeks, probably. I'm with a different publisher now. I'm on my 2nd publisher in this 9 years, which just, my first one was in outside of Houston, Texas. And like I said, I'm in Atlanta with one of the largest writing clubs in the largest writing club in the United States. I said, why am I going to Houston for a publisher? There's got to be one. So I just sought out Atlanta publishers, and I found a new one just so I could be. I never met my old publisher in person since he was in Houston, Texas. My Atlanta area publisher, we get together for lunch regularly and see each other and talk on the phone or text, and so have a relationship that I think works very good for me in getting in my writing done. So I hope that isn't way more than you wanted, but that's how I got to where I am. And as you mentioned, last year and this year, a nominee for Georgia Author of the Year. I did not win, but I was thrilled beyond words, honored to be a nominee for Georgia Author of the Year, considering, as I mentioned, that 2 of the people I was up against were Iris Johansson and Karen Slaughter, Karen with an I, who both happen to be from Georgia, and they were up from Georgia Author of the Year. And I'm sorry, this is the mystery detective category. There's several genres, and I was up against them. So to be considered amongst those greats was just phenomenal. So I'm sorry. Again, I probably gave you way more than you wanted, but I was a speech major in college, and I tend to be loquacious. So once I get started, it's hard for me to stop. So please forgive me.
No, you are fine. You are absolutely fine, Shane, because you've given the audience now, they now have what I knew. So now I can begin our conversation. Excuse me. I want to back up a little bit. You moved to Georgia.
The first grade, huh?
Yeah, let's go back to first grade. Let's go way back. Let's go back to Mississippi.
Oh,
and
yeah.
before to you then, but
you said it right, Mississippi.
Wait a minute now. Did that southern part come out when I said it?
I'm joking. I don't think you did, but I was going to claim you did anyway. So please.
Okay. Well, I like I said, I'm a Southern Belle, so it's going to be what I don't want it to. So, but you moved from Mississippi to Atlanta or to Georgia. Now, prior to becoming an author, what type of work did you do?
Oh, excuse me. I was in high-tech sales. let's just call it computer stuff. I could be as esoteric or as arcane as you like, and we both probably regret it, but just say computers. I sold computer stuff.
Okay.
And I think anybody would like to know specifically what I sold. I could go into that. I can still talk that stuff, but I have no desire to.
No. That was your transition into what you did. So you were selling computer stuff, and that's important because people have to realize that you didn't just wake up one day and become an author with 9 novels working on your 10th one. It didn't happen that way. You had what people sometimes say is their fallback job or their real job. You had a traditional job, but at some point you were able to take your love of reading, retweak it because of the stroke, and then take that focus, that laser focus that you had, and discipline because you're a black belt, and then began to write. Because I think it's remarkable that 12 pages into your first novel, you knew that it was good enough to be published.
Don't tell Cyrus I said that, but you need to be my publicist. You just described me perfectly. Don't tell our friend Cyrus I said that.
I won't tell him
because we know he's going to see this.
Exactly. Exactly. As the movie says, I'll never tell.
He'll appreciate my sense of humor. He's known me a while now, so.
Well, but really, that's amazing to me that you knew that. But again, that's because of your love of reading.
Yes, no doubt.
Now, you write in the mystery detective arena, a genre, I should say. And, I've looked at some of your titles: Bottom Dwellers, Mind Dwellers, Trail Dwellers.
Well, easy for you to say.
I mean, really, it's almost like a tongue twister here. Bottom Dwellers, Mind Dwellers, and Trail Dwellers.
I'm sorry, I've never thought of that before.
Now, how did the dwellers? Because we're not gonna give the stories away, but how did you settle on that term?
That's an interesting story. I was in a Starbucks one day, and I was in my hometown, Jackson. Oh, we had to go to Mississippi because my ex-wife's brother had fallen and hit his head. But anyway, had to spend a longer period there than I thought. I started writing my first novel, Bottom Dwellers, while I was in Jackson. And I had the bottom part, and I asked a friend of mine sitting at Starbucks who happened to walk in. I said, looking for what would go well with bottom, people living on the bottom of the lake. He said, bottom feeders. And I started to go with that, and I went, no, they're not eating when I'm talking about them or anything. I said, dwellers. It just popped into my head. And it worked with Mind Dwellers and Trail Dwellers. So the first 3 that were a series. So.
Yeah, because it's just, when I look at it, it's like, it's such an interesting play on words. And then when I looked at A Brain in Third Person, how did you come up with the title A Brain in Third Person?
Because I described myself and my brain being at odds all the time. I talk about my brain in the third person. I don't say I don't like this, or I don't like something, or I like what I say. My brain doesn't like that. I do, but my brain doesn't. I'm always talking about my brain in the third person since my stroke. And one night I was at a local piano bar in North Georgia, and I said, boy, that would be a great name for a novel. A Brain in Third Person. So I came up with a title, and then I had to write the novel that supported that title. So, but I talk about my brain in the third person all the time. That's how I came up with that.
And, I thought that it was I don't want to say playoff, but I guess it is the right term to use. I thought it was connected back to the stroke. And Nova, am I on point with that?
I said, you're very sharp then if you connected those 2 dots. But my girlfriend tells me all the time that men aren't nearly as good as women at connecting dots.
Now, you're going to get me in trouble. You trying to get me in trouble?
I don't do a good job at connecting dots.
I'm just not going to say anything on that. Shane, you're going to get me in trouble with the men in the audience.
Oh my
You're get me in trouble with the women in the audience. I am going to say this, though. I said this to a person. T.D. Jakes preached a sermon years ago, and I don't even know what the sermon was about, but he says one way that men are like God, he says that it takes them 3 days to basically have an opinion about something. He's like, you ask them a question, and you're waiting on them to give you the answer. They don't have an answer. So the woman moves on. 3 days later, 3 weeks later, 3 months later, the man comes back and said, you know, when you asked me about such and such, I've been thinking. And the woman's like, what are you talking about? I don't even remember. You know, when you asked me about what we should do about XYZ? And so I said that to someone, and they just laughed at me. So when you say that your girlfriend says that you don't necessarily connect the dots, I'm just not going to say anything on that. I have no comment, except what T.D. Jakes said. That's what T.D. Jakes preached.
I'm going to remember that myself. I'll probably be quoting him myself now.
Because I thought, well, he got something with that, because I've seen that play out a couple of times.
Oh, how funny.
But it is funny. But yes, when I think about, because I was looking at it, and I will tell you this, I've done a lot of things in my life, and I worked in medicine, and I also did private duty. And so I know a lot about a lot of things. And so understanding not everything, but what can happen with a stroke as it relates to the brain, and then the brain or the body in third person. I know how people sometimes refer to like a limb or a part of their body
my
that
arm
doesn't,
or my leg hurts. Yeah.
yes,
My brain, that's different.
That's different. And so when I read it, a brain in third person, but we know that your brain is functioning very well. You've written 9 novels and getting ready, writing in your 10th note. So we know your brain is functioning very well, but it is different now because the stroke would have sort of rewired your brain. And so a brain in third person, I just thought that was a wonderful title. Now, you also told me off camera, we talked about the importance of utilizing your 5 senses when you write. And again, because my background is so many different things, I'm always looking for connections. I know that you were born with spina bifida, and the doctor operated on you, and you've had no visible problems with that. You had the stroke. You're a black belt, which had a certain amount of discipline and athleticism. You had the stroke. Then you started writing to make sure, well, I shouldn't say to make sure, you started writing to improve your brain's functioning after having had the stroke. So you want to make sure it's almost like athletics for the brain.
Like as I had mentioned earlier, my mentor told me years ago to try and describe all 5 senses in every scene. And he's a 2-time Pulitzer nominee. Jedwin Smith is his name. I'm going to give plugs very hard. Jedwin. And he became Jedwin because his name was John Edwin, and he signed his name J. Edwin, and a young nephew or something couldn't say John Edwin, so he started calling him Jedwin, and it stuck. He's older than I am now, so he's Jedwin. It has been for, I don't know, 50, 60 years. But anyway, my mentor, he's the one who said describe all senses in every scene. And I'll take it to a different level to someone everybody knows, Stephen King. Stephen King said setting is another character, and therefore should be described like a character. What does the setting look like? What does it sound like? How does it smell? How does it taste? Everything. Describe a setting, everything about it. I do that with every setting. Fortunately, I write books that are set in interesting places, I think. So they're interesting to describe. The bad thing is, or maybe the good thing, is I need to put feet on the street to describe these settings. So that means I have to go to Oxford, England, to be able to write a story set there, which I did. I have to go to Japan to be able to, that same story to move from England to Japan. and I have to go to Napa Valley wine country, you know, because the story then moved to Napa. Now, I don't know if the story is influencing my travel or my travel likes or influencing my stories, but nevertheless, I have to go put feet on the street in those places to write about those places. And so that's what I have done. And it's fun too.
Well, now I'm gonna go ahead and put my plug in, shameless plug. I love to travel. On your next trip, if you need somebody to carry your iPad, I'll carry it for you. I love traveling abroad. My passport's ready to go. Just let me know. I'll just go right along with you. I'll even take care of my own accommodations. But at least I would have someone to share that fun time with, and also to see your mind, your brain at work as you absorb all of that culture through the five senses.
You probably wouldn't want to see that. My brain is a scary place.
But isn't all of our brain a scary place, though?
I guess there are grades of scariness. So yeah,
that's true,
levels of scariness.
You know, Shane, as we begin to bring our conversation to a close, you know, I want you to.
I can't believe it.
I know time goes so fast.
I had to look at my watch just and I went, why are we? I figured we've been doing this 10 minutes. My goodness.
No. And, you know, and that's the wonderful thing about it. That's the reason I say it's not really an interview. Sometimes I use interview, but it's really a conversation.
Sure,
I think like we're just sitting down in my kitchen and having a cup of tea. You said that you were a wine snob. I poured you hopefully some good wine. And
hopefully, yeah.
Wine,
I don't drink the cheap stuff.
Oh, okay. Now, for the audience, now he said what he's really saying to me is, Dr. TAS, if the wine is cheap, don't serve it to me. I hear you. I hear you.
You're setting yourself up for all this. You know, I'm only responding to what you're saying.
Oh, that's a private joke. I can't tell you guys that that's a private joke. But you're right. You're only responding to what I'm saying. But I don't want our time to come to an end. But I think about the individuals who have a dream. And a lot of people are writing, a lot of people have other dreams, a lot of people want to write, but they're just not able to get up off the couch and start. I know about writing every day. I know about it. They don't know necessarily. But if you could give maybe 3 pieces of advice to someone who wants to write, who thinks that they can't do it, what 3 pieces of advice would you give them?
My goodness. Well, start today, because I couldn't do it either the day I started. I just started. So start. Read every good author you can get your hands on. I mean, I have my favorites. I have too many favorites to name. I probably have a dozen favorite authors. Of course, we could, you know, right off the top mention best friends, John Grisham and Stephen King. They are best friends, which is, to me, is surprising, but they are nevertheless. John Grisham and Stephen King. And how about J.K. Rowling? I think now, oh my goodness, I'm a big Harry Potter fan. And J.K. Rowling, read the best you can read. And I say I write every day. There's no question about that. You ask me how long I write. It depends, because to me, to be a good writer, I have to do equal parts reading. So if I write 6 hours a day, then that means I'm reading 6 hours a day, because that's the only way to improve your writing. And I read some of the greatest living authors, and the old guys too. I just say guys because that's the word, but Vonnegut, Updike, Elie Wiesel, Damon Runyon. I mean, you know, I'm throwing out names that you're probably too young to even have heard of most of those, but some in your audience are probably as old as I am, and they know those. But yeah, I try to read the greats, the Updikes, the Vonneguts, the Wiesels, and that's the best piece of advice I can give anyone. Never stop reading, number one, and read the best. And I'm talking about fiction here because that's what I write. And I couldn't write or read nonfiction. It would just bore bore me to death. But anyway, read the best writers you can find every single day and try and emulate it. A smart person said a long time ago that, what is exactly? Well, every book that's ever been written, every book that's ever going to be written has already been written. So all you can do is put a different twist on it. You have no original ideas. Okay, so don't worry about that. The other thing that kind of goes hand in hand with that is bad writers copy, good writers steal. So steal from those good writers. You see a word they used instead of whatever, use a $3 word instead of a 25-cent word when you can, because Updike and Vonnegut did. That's a great thing to do. Read the best of the best, and read every day just like you write every day. That's the best advice I can give. And that's the advice my mentor gave me. And like I said, my mentor is a 2-time Pulitzer nominee, so he knows what he's doing. So
now, you've mentioned your mentor to me off camera and now on camera. How did you guys connect? Because I know there are people out there who are looking for mentors. You've told us that you're friends with Stephen King, John Grisham.
No, I met Stephen. I didn't say we're friends. I said
I'm sorry. You
I
met.
don't want to meet anybody.
Okay. But how did you meet your mentor?
Through the Atlanta Writers Club. Like I said, over 800 members currently. Oh, and I left out one major thing about the Atlanta Writers Club. It was co-founded by Margaret Mitchell over 100 years ago. Yeah, she of Gone with the Wind.
Yes.
So it has great roots. And so I met him through the Atlanta Writers Club, and he accepted me in one of his writing classes, and that was, oh my goodness, 8 years ago, and I'm still with him. So,
well, when I think about your journey, Shane, it's amazing to me how a little boy born in the 50s with spina bifida grew up middle class in Mississippi. You correct me if I've got it wrong.
you were right on so far.
I think it was like the 79, became a black belt. So here we are, 6 days old, had an operation.
67. Don't make me older than I am. 67, not 68.
Oh, no, 6 years old.
No, 6 days old when I was operating.
Oh, did I say it wrong?
That spina bifida growth on my
yes, thank you. I'm saying that right. Yeah, 6 days old.
Okay,
you had that surgery. Yeah, you're 6 days old, you had that surgery. Then in 1979, you became a black belt.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
And then, growing up in the 60s and 70s in Mississippi, moving to Georgia in the early 90s, selling computer stuff. Then, having this near fatal stroke, and how it totally transformed your life.
No doubt.
Totally. And to me, just to see your progression, your journey, it's amazing.
Well, thank you. No, well, I've got to give credit where credit is due. God took care of me. I'm a believer, and I personally, this is my own take. Nobody's ever taught me this or anything. I don't believe God makes bad things happen to us. I think life, living, karma, whatever you want to call it, just being causes bad things to happen to us. I believe God brings us back from those bad things that happen to us. In my case, bringing me back from my near fatal stroke. I get tired of my limp, my weak left leg, but it could be a lot worse. I could be in a wheelchair.
Thank you so much, Shane, for being with us today. And how can folks stay in touch with you?
Facebook, I'm on there. Shane Etter, Etter. Twitter, every social media platform you can imagine, I'm probably on there. So I would love to hear from them, and for them to say they heard me on your show, so I can make the connection and be thrilled to hear from them.
All right. Well, thank you again, Shane, for sitting down and chatting with me today. And to our audience, please reach out to Shane. You're going to love the novel, so especially the trilogy. And again, thank you, Shane. And until next time, everybody have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Talk with TAS with Dr. Teresa A. Smith. For more information on this show and Dr. TAS, you should visit AskDrTAS.com. That's AskDrTAS.com. Talk with TAS is a production of DQ Consulting, LLC. Dr. Teresa Smith, Executive Producer.